Hello everyone, and thanks for joining us for this very special webinar on our latest integration with HubSpot. My name's Tara and I'm joined here by our CEO, Jeff McQueen, who's going to walk you through our latest integration and everything you need to know very shortly. Before we get underway, I will ask that if you have any questions throughout the webinar, just throw them in the chat and we'll get to them as soon as we can, either throughout the webinar or at the very end. So without further ado, here's Jeff.
Thanks so much, Tara, and thanks everyone for coming along today. We're excited to do something slightly different with our best practices sessions. Often with best practices, we're diving into the real specific areas of Accelo. But in this case, we're actually going to be a little bit best practices across two products, both Accelo and HubSpot. Now, for those who don't know, HubSpot is one of the newer integrations that our team has been working on over the last couple of months. And we're really excited to announce that we've now just been accepted as a HubSpot Connect partner. And so this integration is going to be something available to a lot of our users, anyone who's using HubSpot, of course. And next week, we're actually going to be exhibiting at HubSpot's big conference in Boston, their Inbound conference. So anyone who happens to be coming to Inbound, who sees this before the 25th, I think it is, of September, feel free to come on by and say hi to the team. We'll be there in force and actually hosting a bit of an event on the Tuesday evening. So without any further ado, let's get stuck into this best practices session. All right, so what we're going to cover today is really a few parts of this integration, specifically about how you as a HubSpot user and an Accelo user should approach connecting these two powerful and flexible systems together so that you've got maximum control and maximum confidence. So we're going to give a bit of an overview of the model. We're then going to talk about how you undertake mapping between HubSpot and Accelo. We're then going to configure the sync rules. These are the restrictions or the controls that give you the power to say what should be synchronized between two different systems. And then we'll also give you a bit of a sense of what we're doing with our timeline notifications as well as some future plans. Lastly, we'll be doing a bit of a bonus sneak peek. We've got two of them to share with you actually, so hang on the line for those. And finally wrapping up with a Q&A. As Tara said, if any of you have questions during the webinar, feel free to ask them just by posting in the Q&A or the chat section of the webinar, and we'll get to those as we can. And if you do have a minute right now and can just confirm you can hear us all right, please just put a little note in the chat or the Q&A system as well, just because we don't want to carry on with this webinar if it turns out there's something wrong with the audio on this end. All right. The little diagram on the right is probably worth talking about briefly in terms of how the two systems fit together. Any of you who are HubSpot users will know that HubSpot does a really good job of helping with automating your inbound marketing. So it's about saying, okay, we've got information that's coming through, whether it be advertising that we're running, search engine optimization, traffic coming to our website, people filling in forms, registering for webinars, all those sorts of things that happen in your online and email environments. HubSpot does a fantastic job of kind of coalescing all of that information and bringing it together. And what this integration does at a high level is synchronize the information that you want to have come across to Accelo. We'll automatically pull that across from HubSpot into Accelo, so that as your leads become opportunities and you want to start working with them as records in Accelo, you can have that happen automatically. And then conversely, the ability for you to update, keep your marketing system always fresh and up to date. So as your account management, delivery and project teams are working with clients in Accelo, we can keep updating HubSpot to make sure if people's names or email addresses change, or if we discover their phone number that might not have been part of what was in the marketing stack to start with. All of those insights that you glean as you get to know your customers better and work with them over time can actually then come back in and feed what the team inside marketing land need to see. All right, so let's dive in now and sort of get that high level context right. So as I'm sure you probably all appreciate, running a successful business, at least from a revenue side of things, obviously there's issues around hiring and getting a good office and all sorts of other operational kind of administrative functions in a business. But when it comes to keeping the lights on from a revenue perspective, there's really four things you need to do. You need to be able to market your business to people so they know you exist and so they can know how you can help them. And ideally, that they check you out, they're looking at your website, Maybe they find out about you through word of mouth and they do their own little bit of checking and due diligence. But either way, you need to make sure that you've got that marketing presence available so that you've got your front end of the funnel, if you like, people coming through the door. The next step is, of course, sales. And for a lot of us, that means pitching, proposals, quotes, conversations with prospective customers or opportunities to really work through what they're looking for and make sure that we can set the right plans, promises, and expectations to deliver great work for them. And then the next step, of course, which is the area where Accelo, certainly comes into its own, is around that delivery or operations piece, where you actually have to deliver on the promises that you made in the sales process. You need to be consistent with what your marketing pitch is, and you need to be able to do that work for clients in a way that is profitable for you and successful for the customer. And that's what we call service operations. It's that bit between winning the deal and getting paid for it. And of course, the last piece is the getting paid for your work. And there's, of course, selling to existing clients, people that you've already sold to and delivered for once before, making sure you can keep those people close and engaged on an ongoing basis. And the flow, as we've sort of represented it on the right-hand side there, is where somebody starts out at the top of a very top of a marketing funnel as a visitor who's on your website, for example. There's something, in a traditional business sense, there'd be someone who walked past your window display or something like that. But for service businesses, really, in the 21st century, there's someone who's on your website, potentially a Facebook page, otherwise having a look at what you're about before, doing their research before they pick up the phone. And then the next step after someone's a visitor is they actually then become a lead. So they fill in a form, they connect with you, they express some interest, and they're no longer just a random person. And any HubSpot users will know that one of the things HubSpot does brilliantly is help you to craft your content so that the visitors are attracted and come through the top end, whether that be through search engine marketing or advertising or other channels. And then when they actually fill in a form to say, I'm interested, or they register for a webinar, if that's what you're all about, HubSpot then gives you the visibility back to say, oh, well, this person who used to be an anonymous random visitor, actually now we've got a name for them, and we can look at the history and see what keywords they looked for, what pages they visited, what they're interested in doing. And of course, someone could live in the lead status for a while, and that's really where marketing automation comes in. They can sit there as a lead and get, email notifications or reminders. They can be lead scored so that there's someone that maybe your outreach team want to get in touch with. All of that sort of stuff happens in that lead stage until such a time as there's actually an opportunity to actually make a sale and to work with the customer in a sales capacity when they drop down into that stage. And that's where there's sort of that handoff between HubSpot and Accelo. And then the final clean handoff is, okay, when someone's ready for actual work to be done, when they're ready for a project to be delivered, service to be actually deployed is the key. So that's how that guy works. And then we have the billing and payments piece, which obviously is Accelo's land as well, taking the work that you've done for a customer and making sure you get paid for it. So as a business, if you're not doing all of those things, you're not going to get paid, which means you're not going to be able to keep the doors open. Now, of course, the folks at HubSpot are pioneers when it comes to marketing automation. So they've built extensive tools for marketing automation, which are all about telling you, who is interested in what from a lead or visitor perspective. When do they visit your website? Where are they at in their research and buying process? All of those sorts of things are all built in to the way that HubSpot works. And so what we do, but Accelo, that's none of our bag. That's not what we do at all. That's all in HubSpot's land, and they're brilliant at it. And HubSpot, frankly, is a pioneer in taking very expensive and complex content or functionality, things that used to cost literally hundreds of thousands of dollars and were only affordable by the really big end of town. HubSpot made them much more affordable and easy to use. And to be honest, we're really following in many ways in HubSpot's footsteps with what we're doing with Accelo. While obviously a different product, solving a different part of your business pipeline, the principle's still the same. Another key point about HubSpot is, they're a world leader in their category. They've got more than 35,000 customers. They're listed on the New York Stock Exchange, and they're worth $2.5 billion as of today. They're a big company that's had a big impact on the way small and medium businesses market themselves and succeed and grow their business. And so it's really exciting for Accelo to be now listed as a HubSpot Connect partner. We're the first and only partner in their client management category. So we're really the product that lives downstream and help you automate beyond marketing. All right, now it's time to do some demo stuff or dive into the real world. And so what we're going to come through, given this is a best practices webinar, we're going to focus primarily around the suggestions and tips and best practices for how to make the most out of this integration. So what I've got here is an example from the integration screen of the HubSpot integration. And this is one that we've got connected to a test portal that we've been using here as a dev, from a dev team perspective. But this, after you've, when you first come into the screen and it's not connected, you'll have a connect button and you'll go through a little dance that lets you confirm which account you want to connect to on HubSpot side. And then after you grant the permissions, it'll come back in and it'll show you a list of these here. Now, I'm told there's a few limitations in terms of what HubSpot will allow. They have like their free versions of a couple of products that I think have much tighter limits in terms of integration. So it may be that your account isn't able to do this, but the keys, let us know via support what your details are there, and we'll coordinate with the team at HubSpot to really get that button down. Once you've connected, we actually run you through a wizard, and this wizard is a three-step wizard that basically maps to the three steps I'm going to highlight and run through with you now. The first one is field mapping, the second one is status mapping, and the third one is sync rules. So let's go through first and look at the field mappings. Both HubSpot and Accelo are incredibly flexible products. They're the kinds of products where you're able to go through and create any custom fields you like on companies and contacts. Basically, sort of extend them to fit what your business needs. That means that when you connect the two systems together, because they're so flexible, there's actually a lot of flexibility in terms of how you would choose to identify things. So here we've got, for example, when we're doing this mapping, you'll need to designate what you want your field mappings to be for contact fields, and then also what you want your field mappings to be for company fields. Now, from a best practices point of view, what we recommend is when you first run through this process, you limit the amount of mapping that you do to really the built-in or automatically mapped fields. And the reason we suggest that is you can always go through and come back into the sync screen, just like I am now, and map extra fields. So let's say we really wanted to identify their first page seed, what page. So let's say we wanted to pull from HubSpot into Accelo what the first page that this lead or opportunity, this person saw, this contact saw. So what I could do is I could map that from HubSpot, which is one of their fields, and then I could find out which field it belongs in Accelo. And if Accelo didn't have that field, I could then easily create the new field and call it first page scene. And that would actually create that as a custom field against that contact record. And I would then be able to see that information on the left-hand side of the Accelo contact view screen, for example. But I'm not going to do that right now. We really recommend from a best practices point of view to start simple, start focused just on core information. We've got details like, address information. We auto map a bunch of stuff for you. So just focus on the core things in the first phase, and there's always room and scope to go through and extend what you map on later. But it's a lot harder, or not a lot harder, but it's just a bit messier to create lots and lots and lots of custom fields on Accelo's side to match every possible thing under the sun that HubSpot can provide. Because as you can see here, we've got 42 contact fields, 18 social media fields, 18 email fields, 7 web analytics fields, and then 6 conversion fields. So before you know it, you're up at close to 100 fields that you could theoretically be extending or customizing Accelo to support. And you might think, well, actually, really, does somebody who's working on project delivery or account management really want to see the most recent social media click? Are they most interested in the number of LinkedIn connections or the clout score of this contact? And so it's not that those things aren't relevant, they just might not be that important. And we'd suggest as best practices that you extend things gradually. Now, the good news is, as you add these extra fields, what will happen is that whenever those contacts are updated in HubSpot or Accelo, then the field values will flow across. So it will automatically go through and backfill the fields that maybe didn't exist before as those records get touched or updated. All right, so that's the field mapping. Again, start simple is the best practice advice. Start narrow and then extend from there. The next piece, which I won't dwell on too much because it's fairly transactional, is this concept of status mapping. So anyone who's familiar with Accelo's model knows that we have this concept of statuses and progressions where you go from one status to another. And if you're a premium user, you can actually customize what those steps involve. So you can say, all right, I want to send an email over here, or I want to create a task there, or I want to prompt the user to upload a file so that we've got things, for example, like a signed contract. Because those statuses on the Accelo side are very flexible and have business process dimensions, we make sure that when you're mapping from your HubSpot lifecycle stages, that you choose the right status in Accelo. And then similarly, when you go back the other way, we say, hey, from Accelo status, what HubSpot lifecycle stage do you want? And what we do is when you save this information, we actually will check it for logic to make sure that you don't end up with a circular reference where, you end up with a constant battle of both systems trying to, it imports and puts it in status A, but then it exports and puts it across into a different lifecycle stage that then would import it and put it into, a different status on the Accelo side and so forth. So we've got some logic there. That's why the status mappings are more than just another field. But where the rubber really hits the road with this best practice dimension is around these sync rules. So when we were building this integration, we had a lot of conversations with customers. I think we probably had somewhere in the vicinity of 30 different client accounts that we spoke with about what they were looking for and the integration itself. And one of the things that came up really quickly and really consistently was the need or the desire for administrators, people who are probably watching this video or on this call, who want to control the details that come from HubSpot into Accelo, and similarly the details from Accelo back into HubSpot. Now, the reasoning for it is really sensible and really clear. And generally speaking, the main issue is that HubSpot at the top end of a funnel where people are filling in online forms and otherwise, interacting with your website, those people are really, there's a lot of dirty data there, basically. There's a lot of folks that are very early in their sales process. And you might not want to have all that information flowing through down into Accelo. There might just be way too much noise going on. So what we do is we allow you to control what records come into Accelo. So it's the HubSpot to Accelo description here, as well as what records go from Accelo back out to HubSpot. So for example, the HubSpot to Accelo records, we're saying here, for example, look, make sure that the contact has a company before we import them into Accelo. And we highly recommend that you do this. This is definitely a best practice thing. The reason is that in Accelo, a company and a contact are very mutually dependent on each other. And so we really recommend that you don't bring in kind of anonymous, orphaned contacts from HubSpot into Accelo. We recommend that you wait until they've actually got, a company detail or a company ID put against them. And you can also go through and specify other restrictions. So this is the only restriction we've got right now in this test account for HubSpot to Accelo. But let's go through and imagine that you really wanted to make sure there was also a restriction like they can only come through if the company lifecycle stage is one of, so see all the options we've got here, is one of, and then we can go through and choose what those stages are. So let's say we only want to get them after they're a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead or an opportunity or a customer or an evangelist or an other. But what we're saying is that we want to ignore people who are subscribers or leads. So that could be a way to make sure that you don't end up with folks that are way too early in the funnel to be part of your Accelo database. You don't want your project management and your account management team distracted by the noise that the marketing team have to live with every day. Another one that you could do is to say, all right, I only want to find people who have, for example, a last name set. So you can say, right, if we've got someone who's signed up a form that's just, they put in their first name as test and their email address is test@gmail, then you might not want to have those people in Accelo. They just don't have enough information yet. So you could say that contact last name has to have a value set. Or another one that you could do is you could say, you know what, people who keep signing up with Hotmail accounts are just like garbage. We don't want those people. So we can say, we don't want it where the contact email is Hotmail. And if we also decided that we didn't want to trust Yahoo, we could also put in here contact email. And we could say, doesn't contain Yahoo. Now, the key with these rules is that we apply them in an and or a grouped basis. So to satisfy these rules, a contact would have to have a company ID set, and they would have to have an email address that doesn't contain Hotmail and it doesn't contain Yahoo. So it's and. It's not oring. So they stack together. They act as a filter. Imagine using the mental model of, imagine you're panning for gold and you've got, sort of 3 filters. You've got the coarse filter that gets rid of the sticks, and then you've got the next filter down that takes out the big rocks, and then the next filter down that takes out the small rocks, or the chunky ones. You're only going to end up with the very finest material getting out of the bottom because one of those 3 filters has caught it, and they get applied in that sense where they all get applied. All right, so that's the example of the rules coming from HubSpot to Accelo. And as I said, from a best practices point of view, most of the time you're really going to be wanting to do this where it's about protecting sort of data quality on the Accelo side. We actually recommend when you first get started with this, to be honest, that you put in a constraint that says, for example, the company created date is after. So you can say it's after, and then you can choose a particular date in the calendar. And you probably want to make sure it's not today's date, just because anyone you then go through a test with straight away won't get captured. And the good thing about providing that restriction is you can be very much in control of the data that flows into Accelo in your own tests, see what's happening and making sure it all looks good. And then later you can go back and remove this restriction, and any updates that happen on the HubSpot side will flow into Accelo. So we actually really recommend that as a best practice. It's just like, limit yourselves to only have the the stuff that's created after a certain date. Chris has just asked a question in line, which we'll tackle now because it's so topical. Chris has said, sounds like the filters are an and, an or an and filter. Chris, the filters are an and filter. Every single criteria that you have here needs to be satisfied for the record to flow from HubSpot to Accelo. So again, you've just got different levels of filter restriction, and they lay out. And what Chris said is the example with the Yahoo and Hotmail example I gave was because we were layering them on top of each other, and we said that the email didn't contain Hotmail. It said did not contain Hotmail. And then we said, and does not contain Yahoo. While if we did have an oring principle in there, we could have had just one rule, but we don't. It's all and. So the key is to say that it's not Hotmail and it's not Yahoo. So if they come in with Gmail, that's okay, because it's passed through both of those criteria. All right. So now we look at the Accelo to HubSpot changes or values. And the Accelo to HubSpot stuff is really about saying, all right, what do I want to make sure is going to be pushed back into HubSpot? And this is an area where your decisions or control might be based on financial considerations. So HubSpot does have a dimension to their pricing model, which is based on the number of contacts. And you might want to make sure that you're not filling it up with lots of automatically email captured magic, for example. So you might say, right, we only want to push across companies into HubSpot and the contacts we've got against them if they're in certain categories. So that's an example we've got set up here. Company status is one of the following. You may also want to have other restrictions in place, like making sure that they have a last name. So if auto email capture just gets their first name because it's tom@acme.com, you say, yeah, don't push Tom across. He's not worthy of trying to market to or have as part of the interaction yet. So that's where you can control the HubSpot to Accelo flow, and it works exactly the same way. The rules get ended together, so you're able to just specify one and another, and that will then set restrictions. Now, the last thing I want to show you here is this concept of the timeline settings. So while everything we've covered up until now has been around those best practices and how to actually sync data between the two systems, We've also got this area here, which is a new piece of functionality called the timeline, which is where Accelo will push records from your Accelo account across into HubSpot whenever key things happen on certain objects. So here, for example, we've got 4 different modules in Accelo: sales, projects, issues, and retainers. You might actually have them called different things. A lot of our clients have issues, for example, called tickets. And so what you're able to do is you're able to say, you know what, whenever a project of these certain types is created or updated, we want to update the HubSpot timeline to represent that information. And so I'll show you in a minute what that looks like. But this is really cool because it means that the team down in delivery and operations land, as they do their work and as they move things through different statuses and update tickets, for example, or issues, what happens is the folks who are in marketing land using HubSpot get to see what's going on. So I'm just going to save this, and then we're going to come across and actually do some demos together. Just before we leave this administration screen here, one thing that we do is we also give you a log in real time of what's been going on with the synchronization. And so, for example, we've got a few contacts here that we haven't synchronized across because they didn't satisfy rules. And in a minute, we'll have some green ones after we do some demos together to show company records actually synchronizing across. All right, so let's now come into HubSpot here. And what we're going to do is actually going to add a new company record. Now, always fun is to make up some data on the fly and see how this plays out. So let me see whether acmesolutions.com is a thing. Oh, yes, it is. Excellent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create this company called Acme Solutions in HubSpot. And then I'm going to come down and I'm going to go through and create a contact there. So I'm just going to do, classic John Smith. Sorry, I've got a keyboard I'm not as used to. So putting in John, says, hey, can't find him in HubSpot, because HubSpot maintains a pretty massive database of contact details that they share across their accounts. So you can actually speed up data entry this way by using their sort of already populated records. So we'll put John Smith in here. We'll say John's the CEO over at Acme, and I'm going to create that contact. And so John's now here. He's at Acme Corp. We can give John a phone number. So let's give John a phone number, 1234. We can say that John is actually sales qualified as far as a lead's concerned. And so we can save those couple of details now. We know that we've got John Smith in here as a sales qualified lead. Now, there's lots of other fields as well. So you can, HubSpot lets you go pretty crazy. You can say, right, annual revenue, when they became all of these sorts of things. So put this in here, San Francisco, for example. Lots and lots of things that we can handle. And what I'm going to do is I'll go back to the contact record. So here we've got our friend John Smith. And I'm actually going to go across and look at the company record again, John's company. So here's all of our details that we know about John Smith, where he's based, region is actually in Hong Kong, time zone, it's just picked out some details as well, all guest information from HubSpot side of things. So what we should hopefully see is that when we come back across into Accelo, we should find this new company record, Acme Solutions. So let's pull it together here. Let's see if John from Acme Solutions exists. Wow, that was quick. Very cool. So now we can see Acme Solutions with John Smith. We just created John. As you can see, it's all coming here in real time. We don't have a lot more information about John yet, but the changes you saw me make where we gave John a fake phone number came straight in. We've also got John's address details. So we've got the Hong Kong details that came out of HubSpot. And then we've also got the details that I put in, which was just the San Francisco address. And I didn't put any street details in there, which is why that's pretty empty. Now, because this contact's linked to HubSpot, I can click here and just go across and view that that company straight away from Accelo. And if that company wasn't linked, there would actually be a simple button to press here that would drop you straight across and would show you the ability to push that contact and that company manually. Now I'll come back into HubSpot here. we can see that we've done a contact pull for John Smith has been successful. So the first one we brought in was the company record. And then with every change we made to John Smith, we made a small update. So you can see with the green there that sync log has occurred, and we can see what happened. Now, on the Accelo side of things, let's say we went through here and we said, you know, we're gonna come into our friend John Smith, and we're actually gonna edit John. So let's edit John's details. And let's say it's Mr. John, and let's just say his phone number is slightly different. So let's make the mobile number, 5678, and a bunch of other custom fields if you wish to have that. Say, right, yep, there's the details of John. And so now what we've done is we've made some changes on the Accelo side to John Smith. Let's add John's colleague. So we'll come into contacts here. And let's add John's colleague, Mary Jones. And Mary's the ops director. And Mary's phone number is slightly different again. And Mary, what did I call Mary again? Jones. Sorry, keyboard biting me again. AcmeSolutions.com. And you can say, right, Mary's in these details. And so what we should see happen over on the Accelo side, on the HubSpot side pretty soon, is we should actually see that we end up with two things happening. One of them is we end up with John and Mary. So the time it took me to hit refresh, we'd already pushed Mary's details across here. So we can open that up. And also we'll drill in and have a look. We can see that John had extra details updated as well. So I can go in and view all of those extra details if we wish to. Here we can see Mary, and look, we got Mary's details as we just entered them directly into Accelo. So the use case of this is, you've got team members that are working with Acme Solutions, they become a customer. All of a sudden you get handed off from whoever you were working with there at the sales process, and all of a sudden now there's a delivery team on the client side. And so you want to actually go through and say, all right, we need to, we're going to add Mary and Richard and a whole bunch of other people that you're working with. And so those folks can then become part of the HubSpot record and become part of the marketing automation system as well. Now, the last thing I wanted to show you in the HubSpot land here is how you're able to see this timeline stuff take effect. So let's just call this, HubSpot test project. Pardon me. Test project here. We'll make it a project as planned. Wants us to just upload a file really quickly. So I'll just go and grab something quick and easy. Okay. Test pictures here. Go through and create this project. And because this project is against John Smith over at Acme, what we'll see really quickly here is that, I'll just do a quick refresh to give it a push. We'll actually see that I'm logged in as Tara at the moment, and I can see that Tara created this new project, test HubSpot project, that I can click here to show the details of what that involved. It was type project, status is planned, and manager is Tara. And so these links exist inside of HubSpot. So it's easy for your marketing team or anyone else who's using HubSpot, might be your sales folks as well, to be able to see what's going on. And you can apply that not just to projects, but also service tickets, retainers, even the sales that you're running through the Accelo side of things. All right, so that's what we wanted to cover from a best practice point of view with HubSpot. To reiterate, the key is start simple with your field mapping. You can always add them later. Make sure that you set your filter rules to give you maximum control. Both HubSpot and Accelo are powerful multi-table relational database driven systems. That means they don't have undo keys. There's no like, oh yeah, let me just undo that. So definitely start your criteria of synchronizing narrow. Use things like the created date as a filter to start with, just so you can do your testing with safety, and then loosen things up. It's always easier to loosen things up after starting tight than it is to start loose and then we should tighten later, because it really isn't that undo key. And then the last thing, which I didn't actually mention, is that once you feel like you've got things in the right shape, the right field mapping, and they're appropriately organized, then what you can do is you can actually execute a push or a pull. The push is an export function which pushes everything that's in Accelo to HubSpot, and the pull function is an import that says, hey, HubSpot, give me everything you've got. And then with both of those buttons, what we're doing is we're actually applying the rules, your sync rules, every time that we do those pushing and pulling behaviors. The last comment I'll make, just for as more of an FYI, is the way the integration works is after a company and a contact are synchronized between the two platforms, even if the rules get changed later and get tightened up, we'll still keep those company and contact records synchronized together. We won't, sort of ignore the syncing process, because once they've been paired up, they're kind of like joined. So it makes sense to keep them in sync on an ongoing basis. So the rules are really what's used in that first process of pulling somebody in or pushing someone across, either through these bulk buttons at the top here or just by making changes inside of each product.